Phantom truck in rural Oklahoma. I live out in the country, but not like the deep woods or anything like that. We have neighbors that live close by, although there is a cemetery about a mile away in walking distance. About 6 or 7 years ago, I decided to start riding my bike for exercise, just to the entrance of the cemetery and back. One early evening, I decided to go bike riding. I decided to go straight rather than turn towards the cemetery. When I was coming back, I saw this old green and white striped Chevy pick up. There was a pretty young guy driving in it. I didn't hear the engine, but it was coming right at me. Then it turned all of a sudden towards the cemetery. There was no dust flying up from behind it or anything like that. This took place during the summertime. There should have been dust and the sound of a motor, but nothing. He started to loop around, and I pedaled my bicycle as fast as I could. I've never been so scared in my life. It was just so creepy. Needless to say, I never rode my bike out that way ever again. I never saw that truck again until 2005. My sister and I were outside. It wasn't quite dark yet, and we saw the same truck coming down the road. It reached my mom's house and then disappeared. We kept waiting and waiting, but nothing. We were pretty freaked out. I just finished watching a spooky show with her, and we got to talking about scary stuff. I had mentioned the truck incident to her, and then we saw it. For 3 nights in a row, it would come down the road with its lights on, and those overhead lights with one light out. It came down the road and disappeared. Well, on the 4th night, with no sight of the truck, we decided to find the truck. Fortunately for us, we didn't find it. I have not seen that truck since then. I will probably see it tonight just because I mentioned it. I'm afraid that it might be an omen or something like that. If anyone is from rural Oklahoma and has seen a truck similar, let me know. I'm quite interested in knowing its origin, if there is one. Trucker apparition. I must share the story with you before I write my second experience. For those of you who have read my last post, I mentioned that my adopted mom has experienced some horrific hauntings, ghosts, and spirits. This is one that happened about 1 year ago. My adopted mom called me in a frantic one afternoon, and what she told me brought chills to my whole body. She was traveling on a road in Arkansas when a herd of deer ran out in the middle of the road at 9:36 p.m. The traffic went to 70 miles per hour to brakes. There were 2 18-wheelers in front of her and 3 cars in front of them, so you can only imagine the outcome. The 18-wheeler had to stop so quickly that the trailer swung around and cleared everything within its path, including the cab of the truck. There was wreckage and deer all over the road, and luckily my mom was able to stop just in time, due to the smart distance that she kept, far enough away that she was able to stop. She has driven a truck for 20 years. As she pulled off the median, she noticed a man standing 6 feet from her trailer. Wondering how a man got next to her trailer so fast and without her seeing him, she said he had one hand across his chest and one hand in his pocket, looking very confused. The rescue team was on the way while the police were questioning the accident. One walked up to my mom and asked, "What happened here?" As she was telling him about what happened, she mentioned that someone needs to check this guy out back by my trailer. He looks very confused. He might wander off in the traffic. And by then, he had vanished. The cop said, "What man?" Well, he was just right there in plain view. The officer got a description so detailed down to facial hair and shoes. He walked away for a minute and came back and said the man you described is the owner of that wrecked 18-wheeler and was found dead at the scene. She was in shock as the cop just turned around and walked the other way. After she left, she stopped at a truck stop, and on the news was the wreck she just witnessed. There were 4 fatalities that night. She even left the scene before the rescue team came. The man she saw next to her truck was one of the victims in the accident. Old lady behind the truck. This experience is one of the most puzzling and scariest things that's happened in my life, way back on childhood days. I was 9 years old at the time, and around 9:30 in the evening, my father, who died last May of 2009, instructed me to buy penicillin for his wound from a local pharmacy 4 blocks away from our house. I was kind of hesitant to buy, since it was early late night, and I don't have anyone else to accompany me in buying the medicine. My father is so strict, so I don't have an option, but followed his command. I was walking on the way to the pharmacy. Nothing happened though, since there's a lot of bystanders on the second block and streetlights are all up. Until the third block. Eventually I reached the local store whose main business is selling and buying rice and corn. Unfortunately, the store is closed, and all the trailer trucks and cargo trucks are on the side of the road, of course, parking. As I was walking beneath the shadows of the trucks, I felt eerie, and I felt that someone is looking at me. However, I just don't mind it, since I need to hurry up to get to the pharmacy and the store will be closing at around 10 p.m. I bought the medicine and hurried to go home. I wanted to go to the other road direction because I feel uncomfortable walking in the parked trucks. However, a lot of barking dogs are waiting on the other road, so I don't want to run over the dogs, so I decided to take the same road where I was walking earlier. While I was walking past the trucks, I heard some scratches on the other side of the parked truck. I was thinking it might be a dog or a cat, I just didn't mind it. As I was approaching to the last parked truck, where there was a minimal lights and a mango tree, I feel uneasy. And to my surprise, I met an old lady right in front of me. I thought that it might have been a beggar, but as I look at her, her long head hair are rising, and her eyes are orange-red in color. She is floating amid the air. I was shocked, so I froze like a candle. All my life, I've never seen an old woman floating and looking at me like that. She is approaching at me with her hand ready to touch my elbows. However, a dog came right out from under the tire of the truck and barked at her fiercely. That's the time I was able to move again and run for my life to go on home. Some bystanders on the second block are amazed and shocked and shouted at me, saying why I was so pale and in such a hurry. I just had a look of teary-eyed and headed to our gate and knocked as loud as I could. I forgot about the doorbell since I was so scared and nervous. My father opened the gate eventually and looked at me, puzzled. He asked me what happened and why I knocked on the gate very loud and fast instead of pressing the doorbell. I told him the whole event, and he said I was just hallucinating since I like to watch horror movies. I protested his opinion because I was there and I was the one who encountered that old lady on the truck. Still, he would not believe me. I handed the drugs to his hand and went to my room and prayed that old lady won't ever bother me again. As of the moment, nearly 16 years later from that incident, I always remember that incident in my mind vividly, and it always gives me goosebumps. Haunted Tunnel. I lived in Virginia for several years as a child and teenager. Growing up in a semi-rural area, I heard many haunted stories from family and friends, some of them revolving around sensible. I'm not positive on the spelling, tunnel. The paranormal has always interested me because I started having ghostly experiences at a very young age. And of course, as soon as I got the chance to check out this tunnel myself, I did. Sensible Tunnel is nestled in between two mountains in Hawkins County. It stands almost at the end of a long and narrowly winding road. Houses are few and far between on this road, but there is a house at either end of the tunnel, one of which was coined the Sensible Mansion. Across the road from the mansion is a small cemetery that I believe to be a family burial place. There is a creek that runs on one side of the tunnel, and now unused train tracks that lay on top of the tunnel. My most hair-raising experiences at Sensible Tunnel happened when I was 14 years old. It was winter, and all of the schools in the area had been dismissed early because of the snow. My boyfriend Jake and his friend Opie picked my best friend Tanya and I up from school. We went to my house for a while, but being teenagers, we were soon bored. So, as soon as the sun went down, we decided to venture out to the tunnel. Opie had never been, and Jake had only been once before. So, we all piled into Opie's truck, which is a small Ranger-type truck with bucket seats. Opie drove, Tanya sat in between the bucket seats, and I sat on Jake's lap on the passenger side. When we got to the tunnel, there was about a half a foot of water standing in the middle of it due to snow that had melted from an earlier snowstorm. We pulled into the middle of the tunnel, and Opie turned the truck and lights off. We sat there for a few minutes, joking about the ghosts. Perhaps this was a mistake, because it wasn't long before strange things started happening. The other three in the truck were talking when I noticed that something was dripping from the inside rearview mirror of the truck. I wiped it with my finger and noticed it was the consistency of water. I pointed this out to everyone else, and Opie said, That's never happened before." Tanya thought it might have been the condensation, but Jake pointed out that the windows weren't fogged over. Then we heard the footsteps in the water. It sounded like someone was walking up behind the truck. We all heard it, and we all turned to look at the same time. We saw nothing. Jake rolled down his window and stuck his head out, looked down the bed of the truck to the back, and Opie did the same on his side. Neither of them saw anything. I remember them both rolling their windows back up, and Jake looking at me saying, "That was weird." I will never forget the look in his eyes. He was definitely getting scared. I replied, "Yeah, that was weird." Tanya requested that we leave, but the rest of us weren't ready. Then something hit the truck, hard enough that it rocked the entire truck. It sounded like it was coming from Jake's side, on the truck bed. Tanya and I screamed, and the boys came close to screaming. It was then that a white, translucent figure appeared in front of us, at a distance of about 10 feet. It appeared to me as if there was a woman in a long flowing dress, and she was getting closer ever so slowly. It was at this point that Opie said, "It's time to go." And he started the truck, and we drove back to my house. When we pulled into my driveway, we all poured ourselves out of Opie's cramped truck. Jake said he wanted to know what hit the truck. He and Opie began looking at the truck to see if there were any damages or signs that something had hit it. They found what they were looking for in the form of a handprint, longer and wider than any of ours. We all placed our hands in the print, and it was much larger than ours, at least 3 inches longer than the boys. About a week later, Opie decided he hadn't had enough of the tunnel. He talked our friend Clinton into going with him to the tunnel to spend the night. They stopped by KFC on the way and bought a bucket of chicken. They were ready to post up for the night. Their vigilance would go unrewarded that night. They were eventually tired of waiting and seeing nothing, and decided to go home in the wee hours of the morning. Opie took Clinton back to his truck, and Clinton followed him the rest of the way into town. Opie totaled his truck that night. He wrecked with no good cause, while Clinton watched helpless behind him. Opie had no memory of why he wrecked it, but I have a theory. I don't want to be quick to make a firm conclusion, but because I wasn't there that night, but I do wonder if OP picked something up inside the tunnel. Is that even possible? I don't know. But if anyone has any thoughts, I'll be happy to listen. I have other stories as well if anyone is interested. Thank you for taking the time to read my story. I know it's long.